Welcome back, everybody, to the Breakdown Podcast YouTube channel. My name's Corey, and with me once again to help me break down the latest episode of Miss Marvel, it's Vic.
What's up? I'm doing my greatest impression of Daredevil today, folks.
You are?
I'm blind. I can't.
Well, that's the wrong thing. We'll talk about that at another time. You can do that impersonation later. Before we get started, we do want to let you know we have a live show we do every Tuesday at 7 p.m.-ish Eastern on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/MillerKing_51. We will have the link in the description down below. Come by, hang out with us, and join the chat and have some fun with us as we talk whatever the topic happens to be. Currently, we're going to be talking about Thor: Love and Thunder, and we warn you there will be spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, you might want to wait. But yeah, after that week, we'll be talking about some different random things, and so come by and hang out with us. And if you can't join the chat, we do have the episodes available for your listening pleasure on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. And please be sure to also hit the subscribe button down below and hit the bell for notifications when we do put up a new video, and leave some comments and let us know what you thought. So Vic, without further ado, let's break it down.
And on this week's episode of Miss Marvel called Time and Again, we are introduced again to the backstory of the well, no, because we don't know what Muniba's actual last name is. We're brought into the history of Muniba's family, Muniba's side of the family. That's Kamala's mom. And
which we kind of called.
Yeah.
Which we kind of called that this would happen.
Right. So, but I think the history lesson, like I said, I enjoy history, and I think like seeing, we knew the story because they've kind of edged it in on every episode just a little bit, so you know that it's an ancestral thing. But here we actually get to see what happened after Aisha ran from the temple after finding the bangle, and dude was chasing her down. Like, I have questions. Like, I know that I know it's a British guy, and he's just chasing this Indian woman down for, I guess, looting the temple. But it could be possible that it's more than that. Like, it could be a connection to the Ten Rings. It could be, like, more than just, him trying to catch her. But in the course of trying to catch her, because she was booking it, she just kind of flings around and heart darts that dude with a blade and like ends him like instantly, showing that she definitely has some sort of skills. But apparently her conjured weapon are those daggers, because as we know, she is a jinn, she is part of the clandestine, and she is, once she realizes what she has, she decides that she doesn't want to go back, because she realizes that amount of power, we still don't know why they got exiled. So
no,
she had to have done something to have been exiled, but I'm guessing out of the group that got exiled, she was probably the nicer one of them all.
Now, do you think we'll actually find out why they were exiled? Honest opinion?
Honest opinion, I don't think so. I don't think that they'll really go into it, because of what happens later on in this episode. We'll definitely get to that, because I kind of had the same question myself. But at this point, all of them are dead. So, which I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, they, like, the only person that could possibly, pull back the veil, as it were, or the Noor, or as it would be Cameron. And I don't know how much he would know, because he's young like her. So does he really know what's happened? Has his mom really told him what they did, as opposed to why they want to get back for being exiled? Because the bad guys never tell you the full story. So do you think she really went into detail, like, oh yeah, we were terrorists that tried to take over the the monarchy there, and we got exiled for it? I don't think she's going to give him that exact story, you know what I mean? So we'll see where that goes. But getting back to Aisha, she basically runs for it. She comes across this little village, and the big man in town is a Muslim man who runs a rose grove.
Garden.
I don't know what that would be called exactly, but he has a bunch of land and he's growing roses, and Aisha's kind of watching him give this rally speech to all of the people in his town about the evils of the English colonizers, until basically they show up and tell him to break it up and get out of there, and then he goes back. But Aisha hides out under a tree and takes a little bit of a nap.
I wouldn't really say she was hiding out. She was just sleeping under a tree.
Well, I mean...
Let's be fair.
She didn't know that was his tree, though, so she just went somewhere. She went to take a nap under a tree.
Only I can sleep under that tree.
Yeah, and two was like, why are you sleeping under my tree? Like, this is my spot. Like, I came here to take a nap, and you're in my spot. Three Little Bear style. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry.
Don't you see how that grass is worn out? That's the shape of me.
That's my body groove in the ground right
Yes.
there. I need you to stop messing it up. So he invites her in, to give her to show her some hospitality, and he feels bad for her, and she's.
He mentions he rattles off part of a poem, which at that point she's like all starry eyed. Like, really?
And part of that poem is
that what it takes to get women?
Well, I mean, if you got it,
just rattle off part of a poem.
It's smooth. He's got some Rico Suave going on, but like. It's more the fact, and honestly, that poem kind of tells you where they got their family creed of what you're looking for will find you kind of situation, and that's been kind of harped on all throughout the episodes up to this point, and that's where it came from was from her Abu, which is her grandfather, which I did not know that's what that was, because isn't that the name of the monkey in Genie?
You're thinking of Apu.
Oh, it's Apu. Okay, I always thought his name was Abu.
Yeah, because I was literally about to make the joke.
I always thought his name was Abu. So now that you fixed that for me, I understand. I was like, why do they call that fucking monkey Grandpa? Which, I mean, whatever, but still. But yeah, so they end up getting into a relationship. He falls in love with her because of the poem. She falls in love with him because he's smooth. And they end up having Sana, who is
the grandmother.
But then we find out that all of this happened right before the partition actually hit. And that's basically when the country of India took back its sovereignty. The English were kicked out, and then all of the Hindu were like, you know what? We're all Indian, but this needs to be a Hindu state. And they're like, we're going to make you guys, slice you guys off a little piece of the corner of India. We're going to call it Pakistan, and that's where all you Muslims need to go. And that's why the Great Partition happened, and all the people were getting on the trains to go to Karachi and to go into Pakistan, which is where her family lineage is based after, because they all went. And again, this is just retelling the story, but it's actually getting to see what happened and understand that she exists in a closed loop time travel, which was introduced by Tony Stark in Endgame. When he figured out how they could time travel and not destroy everything, that was the closed loop time travel thing. So basically what they've done here is said, your existence created your existence, thus creating a loop which allows her to exist and to have saved her grandmother in order for her to exist. Because if she hadn't been there to do that, then she wouldn't exist. So she basically closed the loop in this episode. And as they're trying to escape, the family goes to the train station that we are now familiar with because of last episode. And she's like, you need to get on the train with your father. And then she's like, you go, because she realized that she was being followed by what's her name?
Scary one, the scary Jinn.
Najma.
What
Najma.
color is Scary Jinn?
Her name's
Scary Spice.
Her name's Najma. When she realized Najma was following them, and Najma challenged, she's like, we need that back. We need to. She's like, where have you been? Like, you were supposed to come back, and we were supposed to go back to our world. And she's like, no, it's not happening, basically. And she's like, oh yeah, well here, and she shanks her. I'm like, you just murdered this woman in the middle of a group of people. Like,
and nobody said anything.
Not one person. And then she's
Not
like,
even one scream.
yeah. It was ridiculous. In that respect, like it's just, I mean, there are a lot of people around. People aren't really paying attention. People are only caring about themselves. So I get that. I understand how like it could kind of get by. But the worst part about it is that we now know that her grandmother, that her great grandmother died, sitting there. And I was actually hoping that she would come back like at the end of the season and like save her somehow and like give her some great wisdom about being a Jinn. But that's obviously not going to happen. She's going to have to learn all of this on her own.
Save the Force Ghost for the final episode.
You think there's going to be a Force Ghost?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so she hands over Sana to her husband, and he tries to get on the train. And at some point, I'm like, dude, you were carrying her. Why did you put her down in that craziness? Like, how do you put down a little baby in that craziness and think that she's not going to wander away or you're not going to lose track of her? And
right.
He like looks away and looks back and she's gone. I'm like, oh my gosh. But eventually, as we knew would happen.
To me, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but to me, it just, you see it in movies all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think that there's that many fathers that do that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it just seems like it happens all the time in movies. It's like, come on, some of us are a little bit more smarter than that.
Yeah. I know that as a father, like, my kids did not, like, if we were in a group of people, my kids were fucking like ducktailed to me. Like I had one, the other had the other, and the third had that one. Like nobody got away. And then I basically made sure that I could see all three of them in front of me the entire time. Like you just don't do that. But somehow he gets separated. And she doesn't know where she is. She's a little kid. She's just scared and alone. And eventually, Kamala shows up. She finds her and she saves her grandmother.
Yeah, and like, nobody notices the glowing platforms that she's extruding from her wrist,
right.
Or the giant floating shards of brightness that lead her back to her dad.
Right.
Nobody notices, just like they didn't notice the stabbing. It's amazing that these people have tunnel vision.
When she starts to try to make the platform, she's like, you know how to play leapfrog? She's like, yeah. She's like, okay, well, jump from these things until you get back to your dad. And she's sending her back to her father. Like, why didn't you just walk her over to her dad? Like, if you knew where he was because you were making the platforms, you should have just walked her over and be like, is this your daughter? You lost her, you idiot. Here you go. Keep a hold of her, please. I need her to survive because I need to be born.
Yeah.
But no, she tries to do it the superhero way, and she makes the platforms, and eventually the platforms break, and when it breaks, it turns into little shards that end up floating back over to her father. The little girl, obviously the only one who can see this thing, is like, oh, bright and shinies, and she follows him right over to her dad. The dad grabs her, they hop on the train, and they head to Karachi. But it does answer the question. I was like, how the hell do they have a house that big? That dude was loaded. That's basically
what makes you
what
think
it comes
that? From roses? Selling roses?
Because he said that his father built that home on his own. His grandfather built that house for them to live in, and they owned all that property. He had all those people working for him. He had I'm pretty sure he exported roses. And if that was the deal, and he had that money, plus he had all of that land, when the partition happened, he probably sold all that land back to India. And they gave him X amount of dollars plus whatever he had built up. They weren't wanting for anything, obviously. So when they got to Pakistan, since everything in Pakistan was basically, hey, we're just getting started, he probably just had a shit ton of money that he could dump into, them getting restarted there. And it looks like that's what he did. And that would explain why they have like this humongous house in Karachi. So,
okay, sure.
Once that all happens, she manages to fade back through the veil, as it were. And she's back in the main hall where they were having the big fight scene before she got projected back into the past. Let me...
and the rip, there's a rift in that opens up, and Scary Jinn decides this is her opportunity to get back, and the one, there was one other Jinn that was still alive.
Right. So when she had used her daggers and she opened the veil that she got sucked through into back in the time, it still left a residual rip between the two worlds. And Najma and I can't remember what the other one's name was, but basically the Black Jinn. There's no other way to do it.
You said it, not me.
She's like, we can go home. Oh my gosh, we can go home. And she runs for the veil and she touches it. And as soon as she does, I was like, well, there it is. She touches the veil and it crystallizes her. And I don't know if you remember, but in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., when the Terrigen Mist hit somebody and it cocooned them and turned them into the Inhumans, that looked exactly like that, except it was purple crystals instead of gray crystals.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I mean, that's as close as you can get to tying these things in. Though I know they're not trying to, it definitely still gives you that bit of tie back to the fact that she's honestly an Inhuman. Her family line, like, obviously the Jinns were part of those experiments that the Krees did, and that's exactly where it comes from. But when she touches the veil, it basically crystallizes her, and then it falls off, and it was really cool. Like, her skeleton was still inside of there. I thought that was pretty cool. And then she just kind of disintegrated, and she's like, you can't go through there, it's gonna kill you. And she's like, no, and Najma's just like, she's like hypnotized. She's like, I want to go home, I can finally go home, I'm stronger than all of them, I can get through it. And she's heading for it, about to kill herself. And even at that point, like, Miss Marvel's like, you can't do that, you have a child, like, don't abandon your son. And she's like, yeah, I already did that because I left him to his own devices at that black site somewhere in God knows where. Mm-hmm. And she's like,
but she says his name before walking in there.
Yeah.
And then once she does that, he's hit with, I guess, I don't know if there was any knowledge there, but he's hit with a bunch of powers that he didn't originally have. She walks in, she turns to dust, basically, just like the other one. And
it's like she understood that she was gonna die when she did this, but it was her chance to try to get home. But if she was gonna die, she at least she transferred her powers, her Jinn powers, to her son. So I'm guessing that he didn't actually have any ability at that point other than like being trained to fight.
Yeah.
And just like with Miss Marvel, his powers had to be activated. With her, it was the bracelet, but with him, he just absorbed the powers, from his mom. Which, again, maybe that could have been done if Kamala's mom had activated her powers, then maybe she could have actually given Kamala her powers rather than having to wait for the bracelet. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he gets his powers. The mom, the scene where the mom was like, I don't know where she is. She's disappeared. I can't find her anywhere. And the cousin's like, you have her phone, right? You have a phone. She's like, yeah. He's like, so you can just track her phone. He's like, find my phone. She's like, hold on. How come no one's told me about this?
Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny.
I thought it was pretty cute because, like, again, you have some parents who are just technologically unaware and they don't realize like what they can do with some things, and then when it's brought up to their attention, they're like, why would no one have told me I could do this? So she ends up her and the grandmother track her down right after she comes back through, basically, and then everyone's done for. And she walks in. And she looks to come out. She's like, "Where have you been?" Blah blah blah. It's like, we've been looking for you. Are you okay?" And then as she's going in on her, she's like, "Hold on, who's the boy behind you? Why is there a boy here?" It's like overprotective Muslim mother.
Yeah, we may. We'll come back to it, but as far as he goes, we may see more of him later. Who knows?
Possibly.
Possibly, it's kind of left it not really to interpretation, but it's possible. I say it's possible because at one point he says that he has warrants from the U.S. or he's wanted by the U.S. government. And it's like, wait, why?
Well, because they're an assassin group that's been chasing down these freaking the
Yeah,
clandestines.
but not in the U.S.
The clandestines have been all over the world looking for that bracelet. It's very possible they follow them to the U.S.
Yeah, I guess that's true. So maybe we
also,
see Return of him. I don't know. I kind of doubt it. But
also knows very
very
good English, so he could have been sent there for training or some other thing. There's no telling. Anyway, but with that being said.
The mom is finally in on everything that's been going on with Kamala. The fact that she has these powers now, she's
like, "You're the light girl."
Yeah, she already kind of had a feeling about the bracelet to begin with when it got there, and see, now I
think she's always known what could happen with that bracelet. That's why she's avoided it and tried to keep Kamala away from it. Because the mom obviously the grandma knows. So I'm pretty sure the mom knows and didn't want to be involved in it at all. But she, the boy, Red Dagger takes off. Kareem, he goes to take off, and he's like, yeah, what's his name would have been proud of you. I'm like, he knew her for like all of 5 minutes, like literally half a day. I get the sentiment, but it's unnecessary. And he gives her his bandana, which obviously will get turned into her scarf. She's just been collecting parts for her costume nonstop, and she gets another component to her costume, which is the bandana, which is going to end up being her scarf because she has this big long scarf that she wears. And then he takes off, and as they're kind of talking amongst themselves, the mom and the grandma, she finds her necklace that she brought up in episode 2 about her being her name. And when she looks at it, she's like, oh, it's her necklace. It's broken. And of course, it's the symbol for Miss Marvel.
That's the symbol that will eventually be on her chest.
Right. And so obviously she's got all the components for her outfit now. So now she can become Miss Marvel at the beginning of next episode after her mom gets back and sews her costume. But, because we obviously know her mom can do it because she made 2 Hulk costumes in like a day. Mind you, a day she made those costumes because she asked to go in the morning, and by the next day she had those costumes made for 2 people. So she's obviously a seamstress. She knows what she's doing. So anyone who has a problem with her making the costume, you can't at this point because she's already proved she has the ability. But with that said, there's a few things. So Cameron gets his powers, and they kind of switch over to Cameron and Bruno. Obviously, Cameron can't fast travel to Jersey. He finds Bruno, or Brian, as it were, and he's like, yeah, there's something going here. I don't know what's happening. And he's like, oh. And he's like, well, you can stay with me until we can try to figure it out. And he's like, he tells him his name's Bruno. He's like, I honestly thought your name was Brian. So it's like, the funny part about that is like, you know that's like a trope about like the asshole guy calling the guy out of his name just to be an asshole. But this guy like really thought his name was Brian, so he wasn't just trying to be an asshole. He thought his name was Brian. I thought that was a little bit of a different pull on it than just going, yeah, I know, I respect you now, so now I'll call you by your real name kind of situation.
Right.
So while they're doing all that, he kind of shows him that he's got powers. And at that very moment, one of the drones that the DODC is using, that they stole from Stark or what's his face? Mysterio. Comes flashing through the window. Cameron blows it out of the sky with his new bioluminescent power. And when he does it, it crashes into the Q-Mart and destroys the store that Bruno's grandparents own. That's literally directly underneath of the house that they live in. Mm-hmm. So, like, they need to get out of the house because it's on fire.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that if you're in the MCU, you probably should not have one of those shops because they seem to always get blown up.
Yeah. So the DODC is obviously going to be the big bad for the end of the show because there's only 1 episode left. So they can't introduce anybody else into the storyline at this point because there's no way to bring them in, introduce them, get them going, explain why they have anything to do with her, and then make that work. So the DOD is obviously going to be where everything goes bad. Now, the question is, with the DODC going after her, do we see either Photon slash Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel show up in order to help her somehow? And if we do, how do they justify that happening? Because we know she's going to be in the Marvels with them. So there has to be some kind of a connective tissue as to why. And the only thing I can figure as is that this DODC debacle is going to bring one of the two of them in to deal with this. And that's going to introduce them to her. The question is, do they go full Captain Marvel or they just use Photon to make the soft intro?
I think, I honestly had forgotten about Photon. And so I was thinking strictly they'd have to bring Captain Marvel in, which would bring the whole thing full circle with her being a fangirl of Captain Marvel. However, this is Brie Larson we're talking about. I can't see her showing up. So with Photon actually being part of I don't. Was she actually part of the DODC in WandaVision?
She was part of SWORD. The DODC.
Well, no.
The DODC didn't exist. She was part of SWORD. She was a member of SWORD because it was her mother's legacy. SWORD was part of her mother's legacy, so she was working with them.
Yeah.
The question is when if they broke up SWORD because of the general, did they then move them into the DODC move her into the DODC for some reason? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because
unless she's undercover,
unless the DODC is part of SWORD, which they could be like a subgroup of SWORD, and then that would make sense. But it's still like out of nowhere she just shows up to deal with this girl, and then this girl just happens to end up in the story. Like I figured they would have put some sort of a thread. What I don't want them to do is she goes back to Jersey City, DODC is there, then for, whatever reason, Captain Marvel just happens to be in New York City, and they do that whole back shot of Captain Marvel with Kamala in the background, and she looks at her and she's like, you're Captain Marvel, and all you see is like the stand-in for Brie Larson. You know what I mean? Like I hope they don't do anything corny like that. If they do that, I'd be pissed off because honestly, this has been a good show. They've done a good job telling a story of a character that people don't know a whole lot about. They've done, in my opinion, they've done a good job of keeping to some of the cultural aspects of Kamala Khan's backstory. So that's been good. Like the history lessons that they've done have been pretty good. Like they've done a lot of really good stuff. I just hope that they don't try to shoehorn this last episode to just shoehorn her in so that they can make sense of her being involved with the Marvels, which would just be horrible because honestly, there's a lot more of her story. Like they haven't even gotten into the fact that she can shapeshift and all kinds of weird stuff. Like she literally would turn herself into a version of Carol Danvers in order to play like she was Miss Marvel because that's her idol. So she would hide out. That would be her disguise. That was her costume. She would make herself
transform into a bucket of water.
But they haven't done any of that stuff, which is fine because they're trying to stick with this hard light thing. But at some point, they're gonna have to make this work. And there's got to be a big battle, and at some point they're gonna have to wedge this in there. And I just hope that they do it better than I feel like it's gonna be done because it's the last episode. Because even at this point in all the other movies and all the other TV shows, the big bad for the season was already in the mix by the penultimate episode. You know what I mean? And the big bad at this point has been the Clandestine, and now the Clandestine are all gone except for Cameron. So he can't be the big bad because he's friends with all of them right now. There would be no reason for him to be the big bad. Because if they're like, oh, you killed my parents, she's like, no, I tried to tell your mom not to do it so that she could come and be your mom, and she decided to just do it anyway. Like, she didn't force her into doing it. She didn't kill her. So, he has no reason to be mad at her, not to mention the fact that his mom freaking abandoned him and left him to his own devices. So, that revenge motive isn't there to make him the big bad for the end of the season since he's already been introduced. So, I'm interested to see where they go. I'm just hoping that they don't just well, we got this whole story in, now we're just going to end it. You're just going to cut off the end and be like, to be continued in Miss Marvel. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they've got a lot to figure. there's going to have to be a lot to be figured out in this last episode, and hopefully they don't screw it up. Because, like you said, it hasn't been that bad. It got a lot of flack in the beginning, even from the two of us,
right?
Especially me.
Yeah.
And but that being said,
I'm pretty impressed that you came around to enjoying it more, though.
Well,
I'm glad that you got a chance to enjoy it, because I thought it was good from the start. But
like I said in the beginning, there were issues, and those issues went away.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one friend wanting to become part of the board, that was all gone. We haven't seen that since the third episode or the second episode, either one. But it's like, all right, good. They got rid of that. That wasn't necessary. Like I said, it wasn't necessary. And obviously, looking back over the entire season, it wasn't necessary. It was irrelevant. And having the other friend there, I guess it's somewhat relevant because of the what we saw in this episode with Cameron. Other than that, the floating messages that we'd see sprinkled out, the text.
I still don't know why you hate that so much. I think it was such a great idea. I think it's a great way for them to push it.
We saw it once this episode, but we've only seen it in 2 other episodes, and it wasn't overdone. And the high school drama stuff was left in episode 1. So yeah, it has smoothed itself out,
right?
Throughout the season, and I know we weren't the only ones that were dogging it after the first episode either. So I don't know how those other people feel, but to me, it's not my favorite show that Disney Plus has put out, but it's certainly not the worst. So we'll see what happens with the next week's episode. And you have anything else you want to add?
No, other than that, I mean, like I said, it's a very solid episode. It told a good story. It answered some questions that I personally had about what was going on with certain people and certain things. So I thought it was well done.
All right. Well, we do want to thank you for watching. Be sure to leave us comments and let us know what you thought. On behalf of Vic.
That's me.
I'm Corey. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.
Can't see ya. I really can't. It's not easy doing this with your eyes closed, dude.
Now you know how Echo feels. Oh wait, she's deaf. Never mind.